Don't you dare sit before me, being just a wife." Mike's roar filled the room, and at that moment a dull pain shot through my belly, now at 6 months pregnant. Ouch! An unfamiliar pain coursed through my stomach and I crumpled to the floor. "Madison, are you okay?" "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" While my mother-in-law and father-in-law quickly came to my aid, Mike, used to defying his parents, didn't seem fazed at all. "In this house, I'm the boss. I'm the smartest and most elite, that's why." His tone, dripping with scorn as if laughing at everyone present, made me angry, but I was too afraid of being hit again to talk back. Just then, someone said "excuse me" and sat down next to Mike. I watched intently as the person pulled a business card from their pocket and handed it to Mike. "My name is Madison. I'm turning 29 this year. I used to work for a telecommunications company after graduating from college, but I quit this summer. I wanted to stay at the company a bit longer, but Mike had asked me to quit because he said, 'I'll take care of you.' The truth is, there was another reason why I quit my job. I was pregnant with Mike's child. Mike and I ended up in what you might call a shotgun wedding. Currently 5 months pregnant, I had to tell my colleagues it was because of the pregnancy and marriage. They were sad to see me go, but congratulated me on the marriage and pregnancy. I still feel blessed for having such wonderful colleagues. So I do have some regrets about quitting my job at Mike's request. Mike's words always carried an absolute power. If you want to put it nicely, you could say he's full of confidence. If not, well, he's kind of pushy. Mike graduated from a very prestigious private university and went on to work at the mega bank MK Bank of America, following an elite path. He was assigned to the sales department, where his gift of gab helped him quickly climb the ranks, and right around when we were getting married, he was promoted to head of the sales department. Lucky for us, I'm excellent. Now the family's secure, he said, as if his promotion was the most natural thing in the world. Mike must have been pleased his efforts were being recognized, and at that time I didn't give it much thought. After all, I had no inkling to doubt the man I was about to marry. But at that moment, I was still unaware of the kind of person Mike really was. I met Mike 2 years ago at a mixer that a friend had arranged. I was 27 then. As my friends were getting married one after another, I felt a sense of urgency without having a partner. Because of my personality, I couldn't take the initiative to talk to men, and I was always shy about love. So when a college friend I hadn't heard from in a while invited me to a mixer, I decided to go. That's where I met Mike. I hadn't heard from in a long time, contacted me. I jumped at the chance. The mixer was with 3 men and 3 women, and Mike was the oldest of the male group. They all worked at MK Bank of America, where my friend's childhood friend was employed. When I first heard that all the men were employees at a well-known bank, I was surprised. My 2 friends, who were more interested in money than I was, eagerly questioned the men and squealed with excitement. I felt somewhat out of place and was about to give up, thinking this might be another dead end. But, as luck would have it, Mike seemed to take a liking to me, hanging back while my 2 friends were in the spotlight. I was surprised when he asked, "Would you like to grab a drink after this?" Since Mike was also my type, I happily agreed with an enthusiastic yes. So, after the group date, we went out a few times, and after a confession from Mike, we started seeing each other. When I asked Mike why he hadn't gotten married yet, he'd always say, "Oh, I've been busy with work." He must really love his job. Since I admire men who are dedicated to their work, I didn't mind it at all. While we were dating, Mike was always considerate, practicing chivalry, and always putting me first. "Are you okay? Not tired from walking? Forgot your handkerchief? I have one, use mine. Look, your shoe's rubbing. Let me put a band-aid on for you." His perfect gentlemanly behavior had really impressed me. I thought maybe I could spend my life with this man. Even though our relationship had just begun, I was already dreaming about a future with Mike. Our relationship took a significant step forward about 2 months ago, a year and a half after we started dating. I had been experiencing some unexplained health issues for a while. I had headaches and nausea, and when I went to the doctor, they just said it was probably a cold, and I couldn't even work properly. Seeing my condition, Mike, who I was living with, said, "Madison, could you be pregnant?" Huh? His unexpected words threw me for a loop. But indeed there were signs. I rushed to the pharmacy to buy a pregnancy test, tried it at home, and lo and behold, it indicated that I was indeed pregnant. I can't believe it. It looks like I'm really pregnant. See, I told you. You should go to the doctor. Yeah. Mike was trying to keep his cool, but his voice was louder than usual. I could tell he was excited. There was a baby inside me, our baby. I thought about it as I rubbed my belly. It made me feel an indescribable sense of affection. The next day I went straight to the OBGYN. The test confirmed that there was indeed a baby growing inside me. It was confirmed that I was indeed pregnant, and I was told I was 3 months along. The doctor said, "It's surprising you didn't notice until now, but since Mike and I weren't married yet, pregnancy had been the furthest thing from my mind." But looking back, I realized that the strange malaise I was feeling was actually morning sickness. After leaving the clinic, I told Mike that the pregnancy was going well. Is that so? His reaction wasn't what I expected. I thought he would be happier, but his response was surprisingly nonchalant, which caught me off guard. Mike, does this mean? Yeah, let's get married. He said it so casually that it was nothing like the proposal I had imagined. But I was thrilled that he suggested we get married, so I was too excited to fall asleep that night. But even then, I could already see the change in Mike. It was my fault for not noticing sooner. The next day, before going to work, Mike said to me, "I want you to quit your job before we get married." What? Quitting my job? It hadn't even crossed my mind. The telecommunications company I worked for was supportive of women taking maternity leave, and everyone came back after their leave. Sure, some people quit when they get married because they're in a long-distance relationship and have to move away to be with their husband. But few people resign just because they're getting married or pregnant. But I want to keep working. It's fine. I'll provide for us. But still, when I hesitated, Mike let out an exasperated sigh and added, "I'm going to be promoted to sales manager next month, so my salary's going to be way better." Lucky you, I'm so capable. Now our family will be set. That's great. What could I say to that? It's true, Mike is capable, and his promotion must be a recognition of his efforts. Compared to Mike's salary, mine is indeed just small change. Even if I quit, the three of us could live comfortably. I convinced myself of that. In the end, I submitted my resignation at work, and a month later, I left the company. My colleagues were all sad to see me go, but when I explained the situation, they said it can't be helped. You can't go against the man you're going to marry. That's probably what they meant. I thought that from then on, Mike and I would start our happy days together, thinking about our coming child, but I was naive. It was around this time that I started to notice the changes in Mike. "Hey Madison, where's my dress shirt?" If it's about the shirt, I'm planning to wash it today. What? You haven't washed it yet? For a stay-at-home wife, you sure work slowly. I was feeling unwell yesterday. I'm sorry. Once I quit my job, Mike started to say things like, "For a stay-at-home wife, you're pretty slow with the chores." I really want to finish my tasks swiftly, but with the early stages of pregnancy, I've been feeling unwell and can barely take care of myself. He also said things like, "You're so useless. That's why you could quit your job so easily." If it were me, they would have begged me to stay, belittling my capabilities. Even though it was Mike who wanted me to quit, I'm infuriated by the way he speaks to me. But due to my continued ill health and lack of energy to stand up to Mike, all I could do was hang my head in those moments. Seeing that I didn't fight back, Mike seemed to think he could treat me like a punching bag, venting his work frustrations on me. That guy is totally useless. Just a newbie and already leaving on time. There are too many incompetents in the world. Even the bosses are just old and can't do their jobs. I found all his comments unbearable because they were so disdainful. But now, having quit my job, I had to endure it because he was the only one supporting me and the child. Months passed like this with me feeling restricted until I overcame the long period of morning sickness and entered the stable period of my 6th month of pregnancy. I'd like to arrange a meeting to introduce our families for the wedding. Can you check with your parents for their availability? We hadn't yet greeted each other's parents formally, nor had we had a family meet and greet due to my pregnancy. As gathering multiple times would be difficult, we thought, why not gather both families together all at once? Alright, Mike agreed surprisingly readily and immediately contacted his family. I reached out to mine as well, and we found a date that worked for everyone. Eventually, the wedding introduction and family meet and greet were set for 2 weeks later on Sunday. I was preparing myself mentally and physically for the day, but Mike kept ordering me around as if I was using pregnancy as an excuse to slack off on housework. I was never slacking, I was just taking breaks now and then. Why must I be spoken to this way, I wondered, as my frustration built up. Then came the Sunday. 2 weeks later, we headed to the event, which would take place at Mike's parents' home due to the large number of attendees. Welcome, Madison. We've been looking forward to meeting you. It's nice to meet you. My name is Madison. I hope to get along well with everyone. His parents seemed kind and classy, which put me at ease. They were very happy when I handed them the flowers I brought as a gift. In addition to Mike's parents, there were cousins, uncles, and aunts. My family was also there, sitting politely in the living room. I stood in the kitchen with my mother-in-law helping to prepare the meal, and she was constantly concerned about my well-being. Are you okay, Madison? If you're not feeling well, you can sit and rest. Thank you. I'm fine for now. I'll take a break if I get tired. Grateful for her concern, I continued to chop and cook. But as she said, after about 30 minutes, my back started to hurt from the weight of my belly. I'm sorry, I need to rest for a bit. Of course there are cushions over there. Please have a seat. Thank you. I sat down on a cushion in the living room, as indicated by my mother-in-law. At first, I had a pleasant chat with Mike's relatives, but then Mike, who had been drinking, came over to where I was sitting. You shouldn't be sitting down before me, just because you're a wife, Mike shouted. A dull pain shot through my 6-month pregnant belly. Ow! I crumpled to the floor in a pain I had never felt before. Madison, are you alright? Hey, what are you doing? My mother-in-law and father-in-law quickly came to my aid, but Mike, used to defying his parents, seemed unfazed. In this house, I'm the top dog, you know. I'm the smartest and the elite here. His words were a sneer at everyone present, and though I was filled with anger, I was too afraid of another violent outburst to speak up. At that moment, someone said, "Excuse me," and sat down next to Mike. I watched intently as he pulled a business card from his breast pocket and handed it to Mike. What's that, eh? Mike's eyes widened in astonishment as he looked at the business card passed to him from the man. The relatives were all like, "What's going on?" focusing their attention on Mike and the others. Smith General Trading Company. You're familiar with our company, right? I mean, familiar is an understatement. Smith Corp is one of the major clients at our USMK bank. Good to know. It's an honor. I am Madison's younger brother, a graduate of T University, and currently the president of Smith Corporation. The man was my brother, Kenneth Smith. Smith was my maiden name. I glanced briefly at my brother and parents' faces. My brother was looking straight into Mike's eyes, but I could see the flames of anger burning in his eyes. My parents looked at me and nodded. It's okay. T University, president of Smith General Trading. You're Madison's brother? Yes. You weren't aware of that. I see. I didn't hear about it. This time Mike glared at me. I instinctively looked away. The reason I hadn't told Mike about Smith General Trading was that I feared his high pride would make him unreasonably jealous. Smith General Trading is a major corporation known to everyone in the States, with annual sales reaching $100 billion. If you get a job there straight out of college, you are considered very capable. I hear it is even harder to get in as a mid-career hire. Kenneth was the president of such Smith General Trading. He is still young at 27, but since he was a child, our father had drilled into him how to manage a business. After graduating from college and joining Smith Corp, Kenneth quickly started to excel. Just as my father began to fall ill more often and started taking more time off work, a meeting was called to discuss whether it might be best to just go ahead and hand over the reins of the company to Kenneth early. Come this April, Kenneth finally became the president. Well, I did not need to hear it, but there is something I have to tell you. What is it? Kenneth spoke in a businesslike and polite tone, but Mike continued to act defiantly. In fact, there has been an issue with some fraudulent activities in the transactions between our two companies. Fraud? Mike's voice quivered. Perhaps it struck a chord. Yes, apparently, our sales manager had given some under-the-table money to your sales representative, encouraging them to falsify the numbers on the invoices. And that sales representative was you. What? Mike visibly panicked. What does this mean? The rest of us, including relatives, waited for the story to continue. You were recently promoted to sales manager, I hear. It was in recognition of your hard work, no doubt. But it is not hard to imagine that this position was attained through rampant dishonesty. Of course, I fired our incompetent sales manager immediately, but if I report this to your company, you will not get off scot-free. I see. That is what it was. Mike had been accepting bribes from the Smith Company's sales manager by sending falsified invoices. He had increased his sales figures by engaging in similar fraudulent activities with other companies, which led to his promotion to sales manager. While Kenneth's guess was included, the fact that Mike did not deny it suggested that it was true. Mike trembled on the spot, glaring at Kenneth with eyes like he was looking at an enemy. We could not say anything and watched the confrontation with bated breath. Now, you have climbed the ranks through dishonesty, but just from seeing your behavior today, it is clear that you are not cut out to be in a position of leadership. Punching your pregnant wife's belly? Thinking you are the most important person in this house? Do not joke with me. You are always ordering my sister around, thinking you are some kind of elite because you cheated your way up. Kenneth's polite tone suddenly turned harsh as he scolded Mike. In his eyes, there was a determination to defeat his sworn enemy. What the hell are you on about? Do not stick your nose where it does not belong. Mike snapped back. I clearly saw Kenneth smirk at that response. You just said what the hell, didn't you? Yeah, I did. So what? I don't want to do business with someone who talks that way to a partner. I thought your company would be a good business partner for us, but I was mistaken. Please ensure your company knows that we will no longer be dealing with you in any capacity. What? Mike had not expected to be hit with a sanction as serious as ending transactions between the Smith Company and MK Bank of America. Please, not that. Anything but that. Mike begged desperately, but Kenneth, perhaps at his wit's end with anger, glared and said sharply, Aren't you apologizing to the wrong person? I have no use for someone who can't even understand that. Mike let out a pathetic yelp at Kenneth's shout. I was utterly shocked to see Mike like this. I had never seen him so shaken before. He tentatively looked my way, then said, I'm really sorry. And to the baby, I'm sorry, it must have hurt. But the words Mike had said to me in the past flashed through my mind, and I could not forgive him, just because he was apologizing now. I'm sorry, but I need some time to think about this marriage. I refused him. Mike stood up, dazed, and walked out of the room. Silence followed among us, but when Kenneth humbly apologized for the fuss at such a gathering, one of the relatives said, Let's just toast for today, and the atmosphere brightened up. For a while, we all forgot about Mike's troubles and had a good time. Madison, I'm really sorry for what Mike has done. There's no rush on the marriage decision. You can take your time, Madison, to your whole family. I'm truly sorry, Mike's parents said, tears brimming in their eyes. Despite having such wonderful parents, I couldn't help but feel sad, wondering how Mike ended up the way he did. No, we're the ones who should apologize for causing such a commotion. Everyone, I'm sorry. Just give me a little more time to think, I said. No one in my family blamed me for my decision. My parents' eyes conveyed a message. You need to think this through. As I rubbed my belly, I thought about what comes next. Currently, the idea of marrying Mike doesn't sit well with me. But for the sake of this child, still no clear answer came to me. I decided to take my time with the decision. A month has passed since then, and I've decided to stay with my parents until the baby is born. As expected, Mike's misconduct at work came to light, and he was fired. Smith General Commerce, a major client, apparently stopped doing business with Bank of America MK, as Kenneth had declared. Mike ended up imposing a great loss on his company and losing his job. But he kept coming to my parents' house every day, begging for forgiveness and saying he'd do anything. You say you'll do anything, but you don't even have a job, do you? Yeah, but I'll find something else. I'll make it work. Please reconsider, Mike pleaded. Mike suddenly started talking sense, but it's easy to say anything if it's just talk. However, I've heard from Kenneth that Mike's misdeeds have become well known in the area, and companies are tightening their hiring standards to avoid employing someone like him. If I were in charge of hiring, I couldn't imagine hiring someone who had committed fraud at their previous job. It's clear to see that getting rehired isn't as simple as Mike suggests. At best, he might be able to get a part-time job, but I couldn't see how a part-time job could support me, the baby, and him. Not long ago, I was struggling with the decision to marry him, but hearing Mike's flippant ideas, I finally made up my mind. What Mike did is unforgivable. Not only did he harass me, but he also caused trouble for the company that had been paying him a generous salary. He has a significant debt to pay. With a sigh, I spoke up. Look, you think you can just find a job and everything will be okay? Who's going to hire someone like you? I certainly wouldn't. You can't live with us. Don't ever show your face to me again. As I spoke, I could see tears of frustration welling up in the corners of Mike's eyes. What, why? He muttered, repeating himself as if in a trance. But after seeing my stern glare, he seemed to realize that nothing more he said would make a difference. Eventually, he walked away with slumped shoulders. Finally, I felt a weight lift from my whole body, and I was able to watch Mike's departing figure with a sense of relief. It might be slightly unfair to the child, but it's better not to have such a father. I'll make sure our child is happy. Once the baby is a bit older, I plan to go back to work, maybe dropping the kid off at daycare. Luckily, a former colleague from my old job has reached out, asking if I'd consider coming back. I look forward to the day I can return to work. But for now, I'll take each day at a time with my child. I'm home, huh? Hey, why did you come back when you don't belong here anymore? What do you mean I don't belong here? I don't need someone who gives birth to a child with a cheating partner. When I returned home after giving birth at my parents' house, my husband's parents were there and all my clothes were gone. Not only that, but they were also calling my newborn child the offspring of an affair. There's a limit to how much they can mock someone. Fine, I'll leave as you wish. But once I'm gone, where will you live? I'll live here, of course. I'll take this house as compensation for alimony. Do you really think you can do that? Because this house is my husband was so confident until he heard what I had to say. Then his smirk disappeared and he turned pale, collapsing to his knees. I'm Yasmin, a 31-year-old homemaker. I met my husband John through a friend's introduction, and we married after a year of dating. We both wanted children, but even after a year of marriage, we were not blessed with any. However, our marriage wasn't troubled aside from our inability to conceive, and I had built a good relationship with his parents. This evening, my dad and mom are coming over. How about we go out for dinner? Sure, I'll get ready. We decided to go out for dinner with his parents that day, but I quickly realized it was my mother-in-law's considerate gesture. After a year of marriage and no children, I started to think there might be something wrong with me. So I recently began fertility treatments, but there were no visible results. I heard there are many reasons for infertility, and we didn't know why we couldn't have children. The journey with no end in sight was exhausting. I was beginning to dread going to the hospital to face no progress, and was thinking of giving up on fertility treatments, but then my mother-in-law reached out to help. She had undergone fertility treatments to conceive my husband, so she understood my feelings the best. She comforted me over the phone after my hospital visits. The treatments were costly and unproductive, and she probably sensed my despair from my voice. Until a year ago, she was a stranger to me, but I was grateful for her kindness. With her support, I kept going with the treatments. Before entering the restaurant, I whispered a thank you to my mother-in-law, who smiled back warmly. I was glad they were my in-laws and enjoyed the dinner as a stress reliever from my fertility treatment. Then my husband had to go on a business trip, and we had to pause our efforts to conceive. I heard that continuity is important in fertility treatments, so I was disappointed, but work is work. Maybe Taking a break from the stress of trying to conceive would help me recover mentally. I tried to see the positive side. Even after he left, my mother-in-law visited me weekly to take care of my mental health. She was the only one I could talk to about the hardships of fertility treatments and the loneliness of being apart from my husband. Thanks to my mother-in-law, I didn't have to feel that bad. Half a year flew by and my husband's business trip ended. I was feeling much better mentally and knew I had to refocus on getting pregnant soon due to my age. No way. Yes. Why are you shouting all of a sudden? What happened? I'm pregnant. Our baby is finally coming. Seeing the 2 lines on the pregnancy test, I cried tears of joy. It had been a long-awaited pregnancy. We had overcome periods of anxiety and unsuccessful fertility treatments. I was overwhelmed with happiness, but my husband just gave a strange smile. Maybe he's not happy. No, that can't be the case. Perhaps he was just shocked and needed time to process the news. I shared the joy openly and immediately informed my parents and his. Both sets of parents were overjoyed, and I was too excited to sleep that night. I decided to focus on a healthy pregnancy, but the next day I told him that I was busy with work and couldn't help much with household duties. I asked him not to bother me too much, and his tone wasn't harsh, but I was at a loss for words. I felt good that morning after finding out about the pregnancy, but I was confused by his strange smile from the day before and now this. Maybe he wasn't happy about the pregnancy, but that couldn't be true. We had overcome difficult times together to reach this point in our pregnancy. He was busy with work, so maybe there was no deeper meaning to his words. I planned to return to my parents' house for a while, so I didn't take it too seriously. But my discomfort with my husband's attitude began when my morning sickness started. I didn't know if it was morning sickness or something else, but constantly buying ready-to-eat meals was expensive, and I couldn't relax after work. I asked him to give me a break, but he apologized and said he would cook tomorrow. I felt guilty for not being able to meet his expectations for housework and meals due to my severe morning sickness in my first pregnancy. But I knew that morning sickness wouldn't last forever. Once it eased, I would be able to do more around the house, and hopefully, our relationship would get back to normal. I couldn't just be easy on myself, especially for our upcoming child and my hardworking husband. I pushed myself to cook and do housework as much as possible, even with the morning sickness, but it seemed like my efforts didn't reach him. Gradually, he stopped coming home at night and began spending his evenings out. My hormonal imbalances from the pregnancy made me feel mentally unstable. I worried that if we couldn't resolve our issues before the baby's birth, could we really build a happy family of 3? These anxieties continued on the nights he was absent, but as I struggled through each day, I suddenly found myself in the 7th month of pregnancy and decided to return to my parents' house. I'd already discussed this with them and my husband. Honestly, I felt more at ease going back to my parents' house than staying with my husband. Perhaps feeling suffocated living with a pregnant wife, my husband readily agreed to my going back home. I took a 2-hour taxi ride to my parents' house. Don't worry, we'll support you from now on. I had told my mother weeks before about the deteriorating relationship with my husband, John. While admitting he was busy with work, I also vented my frustration about him not supporting me much. So my mother had been worried about me, and since returning home I've been able to relax truly, even managing to spend days without a single worry. It was something I hadn't experienced in a long time. I regretted not returning home sooner. The comfort at my parents' house was so good that I gave birth to a boy without any issues. He was slightly underweight but cried loudly and felt warm when I held him, bringing me to tears of indescribable joy. Busy with work, John couldn't be there for the birth, but my parents cried with me. Despite the hard times during the pregnancy, I was truly glad to have overcome them. I stayed in the hospital for a week after giving birth, with my parents visiting daily. However, John was noticeably absent. He congratulated me on the birth, but didn't come to see our baby. Though I understood he was busy, I couldn't help feeling angry. Was his work more important than his child? But the excitement of spending days with my son overrode these feelings. That week felt incredibly long, but finally leaving the hospital with my baby made me truly feel like a mother. Hello. I was discharged from the hospital today. Though I had informed her by email, I called my mother-in-law to talk. She had supported me the most until I got pregnant, and I really wanted her to be the first to see her grandson. But since she lived far from my parents' house, I planned to show her the baby once things settled down. John told me that you two are getting a divorce. Is that true? What? Instead of congratulations, she hit me with this shocking news. That couldn't be true. Although John and I had been on bad terms before the birth, it wasn't to the extent of divorce. It was just stress on both sides, and now was an important time to care for our son together. I had no idea why she would say such a thing, but I firmly responded. That's ridiculous. Please don't say such things. No, I'm serious. She then explained that John indeed intended to divorce me. At first, I thought it was a cruel joke, but my kind-hearted mother-in-law wouldn't do such a thing. Her words seemed far-fetched, but not impossible. I calmed myself and decided to contact John. My heart raced and my body trembled as I dialed his number, hoping it was all a misunderstanding. Hello? Hey, what's up? What do you mean, what's up? Your mother told me that you want a divorce. I didn't care for pleasantries. I just needed to confirm his true feelings. He hadn't been there for the birth or even to see our baby afterward. Perhaps he really wanted a divorce and didn't care about us? That's why what my mother-in-law was saying was believable, but I couldn't believe anything until I heard it from my husband's mouth. Please let this be a misunderstanding. I prayed while waiting for his answer, but reality was not so kind. Oh, you've heard already? Well, that's right. I can't live with someone who cheats with another man and has his child. A woman who cheats with another man. My husband, John, was under the misconception that I had an affair behind his back and gave birth to the other man's child. This was what I heard from my mother-in-law. It turned out that while I was away giving birth at my parents' house, John had been telling his parents that I was having an affair. I didn't know when he started to misunderstand, but his cold attitude towards me during my pregnancy and his absence at the birth were because of this reason. But did John really think I was cheating? Or was there some other reason he wanted a divorce? I couldn't tell, but I knew I had to talk to him in person, so I decided to return to our house a month after returning to my parents. And home. Why did you come back? I told you you have no place in this house. It seemed John hadn't received my message about coming home today. Perhaps he had blocked my number. Well, it didn't matter to someone who was considering divorce. I wasn't surprised by his cold reception. I continued calmly without losing my composure. Do you really intend to divorce me? There's no proof I cheated. I know you've been cheating. Plus, I've already moved my parents out and got rid of your stuff. This house is mine now, John bragged with a smirk, heading to the living room. Following him, I saw my father-in-law and mother-in-law sitting at the dining table, and John, grinning, holding the divorce papers. If we are to divorce, this house is mine since I got it from my parents. You should be the one leaving. That's ridiculous. You cheated, so I'm taking this house as alimony. It's 3 against 1 here. You don't stand a chance. I hadn't done anything to be suspected of cheating. Seeing John's smirking face, I realized everything. He was framing me, thinking he had convinced his parents to be on his side. Was he under the delusion that, by creating a 3 against 1 situation, he could take the house? He was gravely mistaken. I'm gonna make him suffer from this. Thinking that, I was about to argue, but John said, "We're moving out our stuff." The movers are here, but my mother-in-law retorted, "Trapping your wife is despicable. We're leaving." John's face changed from confident smirking to palpable panic, but this was all part of the plan. He thought he had won over his parents, but he underestimated people. Without evidence, why would they believe his word? I had shared many concerns with my mother-in-law and built a strong relationship. Underestimating this was his downfall. After hanging up with John, I called his parents again. I shared what John had said and reiterated that I hadn't cheated. They then became my allies, confessing they had found John's recent actions suspicious. He had suddenly claimed I cheated and that he would take the house, suggesting we live together. They had been living in a rental, so living with John in a house would be financially beneficial. They suspected John was trying to leverage this to take the house from me. He might be clever in some ways, but careless in the end. And his parents, who knew him best, wouldn't be easily fooled. At this point, it was already decided that my in-laws and I would outsmart John, but one thing was still unclear. Why had John suddenly started this? Our long-awaited child was born, and everything should have been perfect. What happened to him? I didn't have the answer yet. Stop pinning your own affair on others. We're leaving this house, so prepare for alimony and child support. Wait, Mom, what are you talking about? An affair. John and I were both shocked by my mother-in-law's words. He was having an affair? What did that mean? Maybe because he cheated on me, I got in the way and was trying to kick him out. Was he trying to get rid of me to take the house I got from my parents? That's beyond despicable. He's trying to ruin my and my son's life and take a significant asset. Ridiculous. Do you think you can get away with this? Wait, I haven't cheated. Just yesterday, a private investigator gave us the findings. They were supposed to report back in a week, but they had more than enough evidence already, my father-in-law said, pulling out a large envelope from his bag. It contained several photos and a report about 20 pages long, stapled together. The first page read, "Investigation results of infidelity," with attached photos of John holding hands with a young woman. Disgusting. I glared at John, seeing him now as nothing more than a base creature, driven by his desires. He seemed like nothing more than a creature driven recklessly by his own desires, less than an animal. I was speechless, but upon closely examining the photos, there were some capturing the moment he entered a hotel. Despite just having a child, it was apparent that he had been having an affair. It was apparent that he had no awareness as a father. My feelings shifted from anger to utter disbelief. Had I really spent 3 years with such a worthless person? This is over now. How are you going to excuse yourself? No? Where is your responsibility as a father? You knew our marriage wasn't just about us anymore after I got pregnant. It was a momentary lapse. I'm truly sorry. There's no way a person who strays so easily can be a fit father. Don't joke around. My rage, which had subsided for a moment, returned in full force as my husband tried to make excuses. I let out all my pent-up anger, slamming the table and yelling at John, who must have been frightened by the sight of me for the first time. He seemed frightened by this new sight of me, backing away a couple of steps, hiding the divorce papers behind him. What are you hiding? Just because you're in a bad spot now, doesn't mean you can back out of the divorce. I'll grant your wish and ask for child support. No wait, it's better than being a single parent. Enough. I'd rather raise him alone than have someone like you around. He was clearly using our child as a shield, now that he felt threatened. Despicable. I wouldn't let such a man claim fatherhood. My anger escalated to the point where I was almost about to lash out physically. We're sorry for the trouble. There's no need to get more upset. We'll take responsibility for our disgraceful son and ensure he pays child support. We'll make him leave the house today and handle the rest. I managed to stop myself, thanks to my in-laws' intervention. I contacted a lawyer regarding the divorce procedure in front of him. He nervously looked at me. Within an hour, his belongings were packed, and he left with his parents for his new residence. Left alone in the room, I felt a sense of loss for a while, trying to calm my mind, but gradually, I started to feel relieved about the outcome. If such a man had a hand in raising my beloved son, he might have turned out as terrible as him. It was a relief that I could prevent it at an early stage. Moreover, having my in-laws on my side until the end was a stroke of luck. I felt a bit guilty about burdening them with their despicable son, but my son was my priority. They understood and took him away, for which I was immensely grateful. I immediately asked the lawyer to proceed with our divorce. Then I decided to sell the house. My ex-husband knew its location, and I couldn't risk him showing up in a fit of vengeance. Being alone with my son, I wouldn't stand a chance if my ex-husband tried something. I also wanted to erase all memories associated with him. The house, initially bought as an investment by my father, was in a prime location and sold quickly. With that money, I could live comfortably without working for a while. My plan is to stay with my parents, benefiting from their support while raising my son, at least until he's a bit older. Eventually, due to school considerations, I intend to move to the city. But that's a conversation for the future. For now, I'm focused on settling our current situation. My ex-husband, under his parents' supervision, is working hard to pay me, with his wages being managed by them. I've been meeting with my in-laws every 6 months to show them their grandchild. And during our last meeting, they told me something astonishing. What? His affair partner was someone from his company? I thought he met her at a nightclub or something. Yes, that's right. We were just as shocked. It seems like it got out at the company. Because it was an office affair, he got fired. Now he's working at a factory owned by an acquaintance. He had a somewhat senior position, so he was pretty down after getting fired. But that's irrelevant to us. I never imagined his affair partner was a junior at his workplace. It's appalling to think that someone in a leadership position could behave like that. It's clear why such a person could easily betray me and our son. After getting fired, my ex-husband John also seems to have been cut off by his affair partner. While she's also to blame, it's understandable if she resents John for getting fired. However, unlike John, she's young and has a chance to start over. My ex-husband, who is old enough, had no choice but to work at a factory that was acquainted with his parents-in-law. He's now working at a factory, with his wages being managed by his parents. They've arranged to pay child support in installments. Since his living expenses are covered by his parents, most of his salary goes to me. But what he'll do after that is anyone's guess. It's unlikely that a divorced man with no savings will remarry, and he can't even live with his child he once so desperately wanted. With no goals or purpose in life, it's clear he'll spend the rest of his days filled with regret, a fate he brought upon himself. I think he should feel the mistakes he's made throughout his life and regret it forever. A year has passed since then, and I'm still living with my parents, cherishing my son. Next week, we have our biannual dinner with my in-laws. We maintain a good relationship, and they always look forward to seeing their grandson. Despite my ex-husband being the worst, I want to keep a good relationship with my in-laws. In life, it's crucial to have people who care about you and whom you genuinely value. As for people like my ex-husband, it's important to learn from their mistakes and not repeat them. Like my ex-husband who fit into neither category, it's best to cut ties and enjoy my life. This place is practically my home now, so you better serve me well. When I got home, for some reason, my estranged mother-in-law was there, making an outrageous statement. Shocked by my mother-in-law's words, I blurted out in astonishment. I had been in Hawaii for my sister's wedding, away for 3 nights and 4 days. It seems that while I was gone, my mother-in-law had moved in and settled into our house. And the person who facilitated this was none other than her son, my husband. I confronted my husband about what all this meant, but what he told me was beyond my wildest expectation. My name is Emily. I'm a 29-year-old sales professional. During my student days, I was dedicated to my studies and landed a job at a major insurance company right out of college. People often refer to me as a career woman. Indeed, I love my job and have been working hard every day. However, I was hopeless in love, never having had a proper relationship. But then a turning point came in my life. That day was busier than usual, full of appointments with clients. I was about to head to a client's house to finalize a contract, but left the office at the last minute. Rushing, I grabbed the necessary documents and left the office. I hope I can make it in time, I muttered as I hurried towards the station. Just then, I thought I heard someone calling my name and turned around. A man was running desperately towards me. "Emily, wait please." It was Sean from my department, who works in administration. We hadn't talked much, just exchanged greetings. Catching up to me, Sean, panting, handed me some documents. "What's this?" It was the document I needed for the client I was about to meet. "Why do you have this document?" Confused, I checked the documents I had brought, only to find they were for another client. In my rush, I had taken the wrong papers. I happened to pass by your desk and noticed these documents left behind, so I rushed to catch up with you. Luckily, I made it in time. Thank you. Without these, I would have lost the client's trust. I thanked him repeatedly. I was shaken by such an unusual mistake, but he just smiled at me like the sun. "Glad I could help, Emily. Be careful out there. Thanks to him, I was able to secure the contract that day. This incident led to us talking more often, going out for meals, and eventually we started dating naturally. He was 2 years older than me, a calm and cheerful person. After dating for exactly 2 years, we decided to get married. I was looking forward to a happy married life, but soon after the wedding, a problem arose with my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away 5 years ago, and she lived alone. Her house was close to ours, so she often came over to ask for money. Emily, you're making good money, right? How about sharing some of that as pocket money? My mother-in-law, smirking, cooed these words. Before we got married, I thought she was a reserved and nice person, but she showed her true colors as soon as we tied the knot. Despite repeatedly telling her I couldn't give her money, she kept insisting, and I was getting fed up. She seemed to be a big spender, using up money as soon as she had it. To top it all off, she even called my sister, asking her for money, which really got under my skin. So I decided to talk to Sean, my husband, about it. Hey, can you tell your mom to stop asking for money? She's even calling my sister now. You said I shouldn't bother with her. But why should we have to put up with this? Please tell your mom to stop. They? Oh yeah, I'll talk to her next time. Sean's response was vague, and he never actually talked to his mom about it. After we got married, I learned that Sean seemed to have a bit of a mama's boy streak. In his eyes, I was probably the bad one for speaking ill of his beloved mother. No matter how many times I brought it up, Sean would just say, "That's just how mom is. You don't have to give her any money. Just ignore her." He suggested that I just grin and bear it. As expected, he never really talked to his mom about stopping her behavior. On top of that, my mother-in-law constantly criticized the way I did household chores, which really annoyed me. Meanwhile, as she got older and her health declined, she began hinting at wanting to move in with Sean and me in our spacious house. Since she never outright said it, I avoided the topic. However, one day Sean brought it up. "Hey, mom's getting older and feeling insecure, so she wants to live with us. I think it's a good idea. You're okay with that, right, Emily?" Sean asked this with a smile, but I firmly rejected the idea. Live together? No way. I absolutely refuse. Sean didn't like my response and lashed out at me. "What's with that attitude? Mom's just trying to be nice by saying she wants to live with us. Then let me ask you, what's in it for me? It's stressful enough dealing with her constant money demands and never-ending criticism of my housework. Even living apart is already taking a toll on me mentally. There's no way I can live with her 24/7. What do you mean, what's in it for me? We're family. Did you marry me just for the benefits?" Our argument escalated into a shouting match and lasted for a while. In the end, neither of us budged, and our argument continued into the next day. In the midst of this, my sister's wedding in Hawaii was approaching, and I was busy preparing my dress and other things. My parents had passed away in a car accident 3 years ago, and since I am estranged from other relatives, my sister Katie, who is 3 years older than me, is the only blood relative I have. We have been close since we were kids, and I could tell her anything, even things I couldn't share with our parents. I was as happy as if it were my own wedding when I heard she was getting married and was really looking forward to her wedding. The wedding date was set before Sean and I got married, so I planned to attend alone. About 5 days into our argument, Sean unexpectedly apologized. "Sorry, I went too far. If you don't want to live with Mom, we don't have to." "Really?" I was relieved by his words. "Thank you. I'm sorry for being so assertive, too." "No worries. By the way, your sister's wedding is coming up, right? You're gonna be in Hawaii for 3 nights and 4 days. Have a great time." I smiled back at Sean, beaming with joy. "Thank you. I'll take lots of photos and videos." And so we made up and spent the days leading up to my sister's wedding in a peaceful, happy mood. On the wedding day in Hawaii, the venue was beautiful, with a magnificent view of the pristine sea through large windows. My sister Katie looked stunning in her wedding dress, and her happy smile brought tears to my eyes several times. Katie's husband Ken was a reliable and wonderful person whom I had met several times. I felt at ease knowing she was in good hands with him. I wholeheartedly celebrated their union. After the wedding, having enjoyed my sightseeing, I returned to Japan after my 3-night, 4-day stay. And home. I called out as I opened the front door of my house. To my surprise, it was my mother-in-law who appeared. "Welcome back, Emily. You're here?" I was shocked and she snorted in response. "Yeah? This is practically my home now, so you better serve me well." Astonished by her words, I hurried to the living room, where, as expected, I found Sean lounging on the sofa. "What's going on? Why is your mom here? You said we didn't have to live together. Making such a fuss as soon as you get back." I lied about not living together. "I moved mom's stuff in while you were in Hawaii, so we're all living together, starting today." His casual declaration infuriated me. It seemed Sean had planned to sneakily move his mother in while I was away for my sister's wedding. "So you tricked me?" "It's not tricking. Don't be so dramatic. This is a perfect chance for you to show some filial piety. After all, you don't have your real parents anymore, so why not make the most of this opportunity?" His smirking response disgusted me. My mother-in-law chimed in, "Exactly. You should value your in-laws more. Start with giving me a massage." "That's right, Emily. Make sure to massage Mom daily. And about Mom's room, the second floor will be hard for her to climb, so let's turn the first floor room into a room." Their presumptuous planning was too much for me and I raised my voice. "Stop joking around. This is horrible." Sean frowned and snapped at me. "What's with that attitude? Like it or not, we're living together, starting today. If you don't like it, leave." Stunned by his outburst, he added insultingly, "Well, your parents are gone, and you have nowhere else to go, do you?" Feeling my feelings for Sean drop to freezing, I made my decision. "Fine, let's get a divorce. I'll handle everything." They both laughed loudly at this. "Try if you think you can. Do you even have the guts to divorce? You have nowhere to go." "But sure, I agree with the divorce. You're not even cute. Always acting so high and mighty just because you can do a bit of work." "Sean's right. You don't even give us an allowance, and you're so defiant. A daughter-in-law like you should just leave." Their verbal abuse continued, but I had already decided to part ways with them and kept silent. Taking advantage of my silence, the two of them continued to spew insults. However, I ignored them. I pulled out my phone and made a call to someone. The phone rang and I waited for the other party to answer. "What are you doing? Who are you calling?" Sean asked curiously, but I began to speak as soon as my call was answered. "Teddy?" Yes, I had called my sister Katie. "Emily, thank you so much for coming to the wedding. Are you back home now?" "Yes, I'm back. The wedding was wonderful. Congratulations again. I called because I've made a decision and wanted to tell you right away since I've worried you so much." As I spoke, Sean and my mother-in-law watched with bated breath, wondering what was happening. "I've decided to divorce Sean. As for the house, it's too big for just me, and I have no plans to rebuild it. I'll take this opportunity to settle the house and land issue." I declared this confidently, leaving Sean and my mother-in-law stunned, exclaiming, "My sister Katie was happy with my decision and said, 'Let me know if there's anything I can do to help.'" I thanked her and hung up the phone. At that moment, Sean started yelling at me. "What are you doing, deciding all this by yourself? You plan to clear the land and the house? Don't joke around." "Yeah, right. After all, Sean is the legal owner of the land and the house, isn't he? You can't just decide something like this on your own." His mother's words made Sean falter and he stammered, "Ah, well, that is." Seeing their confused faces, I clarified firmly, "You seem to be mistaken, but I am the legal owner of this house and land." "What, really?" But Sean said he was the owner. She raised her voice in disbelief, turning to Sean. "You are the owner, right, Sean?" Sean stayed silent, not answering her. I spoke to him calmly. "I had a feeling, but you really did lie to your mother about being the owner." "Why would you do that?" Sean burst out, "I was mad that you earn more than me. I couldn't get a loan for this house with my salary, so it ended up being in your name. It hurt my pride as a man. So you lied about being the owner to save face." I cut him off, and he admitted in a mumble, "Yeah, I did. I just kept telling her that until I started believing it myself. Sean and I work at the same place, but our jobs and salaries are quite different. I work in sales, and he works in administration. I earn substantially more, thanks to my hard work and the support of my colleagues. But honestly, Sean's salary was so low it was hard to believe he worked at the same company." Yet there were others in the same clerical jobs as Sean who were earning a decent wage. Sean would say, "Working in a clerical job doesn't mean anything. It's not worth it." He lacked motivation at work and was always waiting for instructions. Even when he had tasks to do, he quickly delegated them to his juniors. His personality was likable enough that he wasn't completely ostracized in the department, but it was clear he wasn't a welcome presence. Despite his disdain for clerical work and tendency to slack off, Sean had no desire to transfer to another department or find a job that paid better. People's salaries go up when they get promoted. Unlike sales where your salary can decrease if you don't produce results, clerical jobs are stable, he would nag at me. With such a salary gap, it wasn't possible to simply split our daily burdens in half. Consequently, I was the one covering most of the mortgage and living expenses. His mother thought Sean had built our house. She often praised him, unaware of the shocking truth that I was the one carrying the financial burden. However, upon learning the truth, she turned to me with a panicked expression and desperately asked, "Hey, tell me the story you just told is a lie, right? What will happen to Sean and me if you really sell the house and land? I've already moved out of my old house thinking I was moving here." "I don't know," I replied coldly. "Sean and I are getting divorced, so we'll be strangers from now on. You two need to figure out your future on your own." As I spoke, Sean clung to me and pleaded, "Hey, let's not get divorced. I was wrong earlier. I got carried away. I can't live without you, Emily. Divorce is definitely off the table." Realizing his uncertain future, he desperately held on to me as if seeing the crisis for the first time. I let out a deep sigh and said, "Do you think everything will be forgiven just because you apologize? I can't continue to be with you, Sean. I don't even want to see your face. I'm going to a hotel for now, but I'll proceed with selling the house and land." Hearing this, the two of them turned pale and trembled. "I can't move out immediately, so I'll give you some time," I added. "But if you continue to live here without doing anything, I'll eventually take you to court and evict you. You should start looking for a new place to live." With that, I left the house with my belongings. Wait, Sean and his mother tried to stop me, but I ignored them. Even after that, Sean kept dragging out the divorce, but I had recorded all the verbal abuse from him and his mother. The divorce was easily granted during mediation. My biggest worry, that Sean and his mother wouldn't leave the house, turned out to be unfounded. Perhaps it was because I had firmly declared I would evict them through a lawsuit, but as soon as the divorce was finalized, they fled as if running away. Thanks to this, I was able to demolish the house and turn the land into an empty lot. While I could have sold the house as is, it seemed that in this area, more people were interested in building custom homes than buying existing ones. Selling just the land seemed more appealing, so despite some demolition costs, I decided it was more beneficial to have an empty lot. While the land was being cleared, Sean and his mother, having lost their place, apparently moved to public housing. I chose a new place to live, moved in, and at the same time quit my job. The reason for quitting was because I couldn't stand to see Sean anymore, and didn't want to continue working in the same place. Plus, my new home was quite far from the company. Now I'm working hard at a new job. This new job is actually at a company run by my sister's husband, Ken. I had been discussing Sean and his mother with my sister, and out of sympathy she had advised me to take legal action. She had been advising me to get a divorce. Ken had always spoken highly of my work performance, and after my divorce and quitting my job, he invited me to work at his company. I was officially headhunted by Ken's firm, which, like my previous employer, dealt with insurance. It was essentially a competitor in the same industry. At the new company, I have been working hard and achieving great results. Feeling liberated after the divorce, I can focus on work without any reservations, making my days enjoyable. I am so glad you joined our company, Emily. You are receiving great feedback from customers and bringing in contracts one after another. You have exceeded our expectations. Thank you so much. Ken praised me for my work, so I became even more motivated and worked hard every day. Word of my reputation even reached my old company, which regretted losing a valuable employee and was scrambling to recover. In an industry prone to high turnover, my divorce and subsequent job change made people treat Sean like a pariah. His inability to work independently became apparent once he was isolated. He had relied on his charm and likability to seem productive, but without that, he was just a lackluster mid-level employee. As the tasks he could handle dwindled, so did his connections with colleagues. Unable to bear the cold treatment, Sean eventually quit. I heard from former co-workers that his job search was tough, and he and his mother were living frugally. His mother started working part-time, but being naturally lazy, she did not understand the demands of working in society. She frequently skipped work without notice and was quickly fired. She called me once, begging for help. "Emily, please help us. I cannot stand this poor life anymore. Sean is always irritable and yells at me. Please take him back or at least lend us some money." Her cries seemed forced, probably just to gain sympathy. I refused. "Why should I help you?" I replied coldly. "We were family. Don't you feel sorry for an old woman like me? If getting back with Sean is too much, then at least give us some money. I will not get back with your son, nor will I give you money. Do not call me again." I firmly stated my piece and unilaterally ended the call. Immediately, I blocked my ex-mother-in-law's number. Of course, I had already set Sean's number to be blocked as well. Since we were divorced and the property division was settled, there was no need for me to contact either of them again. Finally, I felt relieved to have blocked those numbers just to be safe. A year has passed since then, and I am still working hard. At Ken's company, I don't have a boyfriend, but I'm done with romance for now and am satisfied with my current way of life. My sister and I remain close and meet often. Recently, I found out she's pregnant, and I'm eagerly looking forward to the birth of a new member in our family. One day, while working in the area where I used to live with Sean, I saw a man in shabby clothes with messy hair and a bushy beard, picking up cans under a bridge. Taking a closer look, I was shocked to realize it was Sean. Seeing his pitiable state, I couldn't help but stop in my tracks. I had heard from former co-workers that Sean's job search wasn't going well because he limited himself to clerical work. With his personality and inherent cheerfulness, he could have found other jobs even if they weren't in administration. Back when we were still a happy couple, I had even suggested he switch to a field where he could utilize his talents. It pained me to realize that my words had never resonated with him. But we are strangers now. His current situation is the result of choices Sean himself made. It's not my place to say anything, so I looked away and walked straight ahead. "I never thought of you as my mother. You just wanted to hog all of Dad's inheritance for yourself." In the midst of her wedding reception, my daughter suddenly shouted this at me. The room buzzed with whispers, and all eyes turned to me in an instant. Everyone looked confused about what was happening, but I was the most bewildered of all. Here I was at my beloved daughter's wedding, determined to proudly witness her special day for both myself and her late father. Then suddenly this outburst. What does she mean by me hogging the inheritance? And why bring this up now, on your once-in-a-lifetime big day? My mind was filled with questions, but my daughter, now completely overcome with anger, continued to hurl insults and accusations at me, eventually kicking me out of the venue. As I left, I offered her one last piece of advice as a parent. Whatever happens, live strong. She'll understand the meaning of those words someday. I'm Karen. I'm a stay-at-home mom, living with my husband, his daughter from a previous marriage, and our son. I met my husband over 20 years ago at work, where we fell in love. Karen, that presentation was amazing. Thank you. I wasn't very confident, but it's nice to hear you say that. We encouraged and supported each other as colleagues, and our relationship blossomed into romance. My husband, recently divorced, was raising his baby daughter on his own. Looking back, it must have been a tough time for him, both physically and emotionally, but he never showed it. He was always smiling and kind, and a great support as a coworker. About a year after we started working together, he said to me over dinner at a restaurant, "You know, I'm actually thinking of starting my own business." There are a few companies that have expressed interest in working with me. Wow, that's incredible. You're so talented. I'm totally behind you. Thanks. So this might be a bit much to ask, but if it's possible, what's up? I'm gonna make this company a success, I promise you. I won't let us go through any unnecessary hardship, but I need a little support. I want to be there for you, Karen, not just at work, but in our personal lives too. Oh, what do you mean by that? I will make you happy, I swear. Will you marry me? I know it's a lot to ask, but that's how he proposed to me. I was surprised, but I didn't hesitate. I'd be honored without any doubt. That's how I responded, and so we got married. Our wedding was small, but we enjoyed it with our family and friends. Everyone congratulated us with smiles, and it's a day I remember like it was yesterday. It was a truly beautiful ceremony that I'll always cherish. That's how our married life started. It was more challenging than I had braced myself for. After all, I became a mother overnight. His daughter became my daughter. Raising a child for the first time was really tough. She cried a lot, and so did I. But I decided not to yell or rush, just to watch over her patiently. I took it one step at a time, learning along the way. I somehow managed to raise her that way. She was adorable. Her round eyes, chubby cheeks, high-pitched voice. Her smile as she grew older, the way she ran to me calling me Mom, all of it was just so precious. I had been anxious about suddenly becoming a mother before we got married. I worried about whether I could love his child. But those worries were unnecessary. In fact, I was too busy to even think about them. My husband too was swamped after starting his business. Despite having people willing to work and collaborate with him, being a new CEO was tough. There were so many firsts for him, and he was always running around, confused. I remember him apologizing on the phone for almost 10 minutes straight once. I helped with organizing paperwork and such, but I knew it was really hard for him. Still, he found time to take care of our daughter and show concern for me. He was a great father and husband. 3 years flew by in a blink. His business finally started to stabilize. It had grown quite a bit from the beginning. His promise of not letting us suffer was finally becoming a reality. And then our son was born. He was a younger brother to our daughter. Even after he was born, I tried my best to treat both my daughter and son equally. Blood didn't matter. They were both my precious children. My daughter doted on her younger brother. She played with him and was a great big sister. He was really attached to her. Watching them together was heartwarming. Like any family, we had our small troubles, but I think we managed to live quite peacefully and happily. Time passed quickly, and before I knew it, my daughter was 26 and my son was 22. Then suddenly something terrible happened. I was relaxing at home one day when I got a phone call. Hello? Oh, what? It was unbelievable news. I didn't want to believe it, but my husband had collapsed at work. He was rushed to the hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, he didn't make it. It was a stroke. He had been fine until the day before. Everything was normal. It was such a sudden and unexpected goodbye. As I looked at my husband's face lying in the coffin, he seemed peaceful, showing no sign of the pain he must have felt. It looked like he was just sleeping, which made it all the more heartbreaking. I couldn't even say goodbye, and the pain was so great that I couldn't cry. Still, somehow, I managed to pull myself together and handle the funeral arrangements. Our son, who always tried to act tough, clearly loved his father dearly. The image of him, head bowed and tears flowing, is still vivid in my memory. But there was something off about my daughter. It's normal to be upset at your father's death, but this felt different. She didn't shed a tear or speak a word to me. She would help with funeral preparations if asked, but something was just not right. At that time, I was too overwhelmed and interpreted her behavior as her own way of expressing grief. Despite everything, I managed to say my farewells to my husband in my own way. Gradually, I started going back to work and returning to normal life. A few months later, my daughter's wedding took place. After graduating from college, she had started living with her boyfriend without getting a job, essentially becoming a housewife. Now she is finally getting married. The wedding, planned before my husband passed away, was something he had looked forward to, especially walking down the aisle with our daughter. My husband was determined to watch our daughter's wedding without shedding a tear. He was really psyched up about it. I remember how we joked about it. I joked about it, saying things like, "That's still a long way off," as if it had just happened yesterday. Thinking about it almost made me feel down again. I couldn't let myself look sad at my beloved daughter's wedding. Carrying a photo of my husband, I dressed up for the first time in a long while, along with my son, who was also dressed up, and we attended the wedding. When we left home that morning, I looked up at the sky and said, "You're watching from up there, aren't you?" And headed to the wedding with a smile. I intended to wholeheartedly celebrate my daughter and her husband at that moment. The wedding was held in a grand and lively venue. The food was delicious, and all the guests seemed very happy. My daughter's husband was a classmate she met in a club during college. They had been dating for about 3 years, a fact I was aware of. However, since she had never brought him home or talked much about him, I was a bit surprised when the wedding plans were announced. I had my doubts about him, but his promise to make my daughter happy was convincing enough for me to believe in him. He was smiling happily at the front of the venue. Above all, my daughter, in her stunningly beautiful white wedding dress, looked indescribably gorgeous. I thought of how much my husband would have wanted to see her like this, and tears welled up in my eyes again. I had been crying since the beginning of the day. So when the time came for the family message and she shouted, "This woman hogged all of my father's inheritance," I was in disbelief. It took me a moment to realize that those harsh words were directed at me. I was so overwhelmed by the sudden shift from joy to shock that I couldn't understand what was happening. Why had things turned out like this? I thought my relationship with my daughter had been normal, like any parent and child. She became rebellious during her teenage years, but I thought that was typical for that age. Looking back, I realized that she started distancing herself from me around the time she began dating her future husband in college. But I thought that was just her growing up, and I was happy for her. Since her father wasn't there, I walked down the aisle with her. Even then, she seemed unsatisfied, as if she had something to say. I assumed she was just disappointed that her father couldn't be there. Was all this actually stemming from some deep-seated resentment towards me? I never thought I was a perfect mother, but I never imagined my daughter would say such things at her wedding. Why bring up the inheritance out of the blue? Even after that, my daughter, her face red with anger, kept hurling accusations at me. "Dad loved me the most, more than you and my brother. He despised your greedy nature." He never said it out loud, but I knew it. My daughter spat out these words rapidly, not giving me a chance to respond, and continued to shower me with insults and accusations. She claimed that while I doted on my biological son, I never showed her the same affection, and that she had been discriminated against. She said she lived a miserable life from a young age, barely getting any allowance and unable to do what she wanted. Moreover, she accused me of being a cruel woman for not crying at my husband's funeral, and suggested that it was my fault that he had a stroke because I didn't pay attention to his diet. Finally, she even called me an evil person, not a mother at all. My daughter was playing the victim. I couldn't believe the barrage of hurtful words thrown at me. I could see the shocked expression on my son's face at the same table. Her claims were baseless, and I wanted to argue back against the delusions she was expressing, but the content didn't matter to me anymore. I was just immensely shocked that my daughter thought of me this way. Next to her, I saw her husband nodding tearfully in agreement with everything she said. I could also see my husband's smiling face in a photograph. Whispers from the guests inadvertently reached my ears. They were all looking at me. I could hear words of sympathy for my daughter, and at the same time words of blame directed at me. But there were also voices saying they couldn't believe I would do such things, wondering what had gotten into my daughter. The staff of the venue, disturbed by the sudden commotion, rushed over to try to stop my daughter and calm the guests. The atmosphere of celebration had completely disappeared. Watching my daughter show such hostility towards me, I wondered if she really was the daughter I had raised. Was this some kind of prank? No, such an unpleasant prank couldn't exist. Then it must be reality. Was my daughter misunderstanding something? Or had she been brainwashed? These desperate thoughts crossed my mind, but when I saw my daughter relishing in my sorrow, I knew something had ended inside me. Finally, she marched up to me from the main table, pointed her finger at me, and loudly declared she was cutting ties with me. I had no energy left to argue back. I felt drained, wondering what all of the days of treating her as family had been for. I decided to say one last thing to her as a parent. Understood. Whatever happens, keep going strong. With a triumphant look, my daughter turned her back on me, and I walked away alone, heavy-hearted. Soon I heard footsteps hurrying after me. It was my son. Mom, is it okay? Just letting sis say all that? As far as I've seen, neither you nor Dad ever treated us differently. My usually gentle son was unusually angry. Yes, I know. Honestly, it was quite a shock. But it's her choice, so we have to accept it. But this is just my son, overwhelmed with anger, seemed on the verge of tears. It's okay. We should respect her wishes. She has her life and we have ours. Comforting my son, we headed home together. Today's events were a hard pill to swallow, but I had things I needed to do, given the situation. I had to let my daughter know the reality of things. Just a few days after the declaration of disownment, it happened early one morning. I was awakened by the incessant ringing of the doorbell. The sound was annoying, but I checked the monitor. As expected, it showed who I thought it would. As soon as I opened the door, my daughter burst in, frantic. Mom, what's going on? My husband lost his job? He was working so hard, why? My daughter, yelling in the doorway without even a morning greeting, appeared to have rushed over without even putting on makeup. You didn't know, did you? Know what? Let me explain everything. Out of a final act of kindness, I decided to tell my daughter everything. Her husband had been working at the company. My husband and I ran since they were dating. He met my daughter in a college club and joined our company as a part-time worker through her recommendation. After graduating, he continued working as a contract employee. How's your daughter's boyfriend doing at work? Well, honestly, he's struggling a bit. We've tried different coaching methods, but my daughter's husband was utterly incompetent at his job. Looking back, my husband and I might have been too lenient, but he was our daughter's boyfriend, so we gave him special attention. Especially my husband, who seriously considered how to make him more efficient at work and even tried to improve the training methods for him. However, no matter what, my daughter's husband just couldn't produce results. Worse, his work attitude was poor. He showed no respect to my husband, the president of the company. He was often late and would click his tongue in disapproval if something didn't suit him. Still, my husband believed in him, saying he's the man our daughter chose so surely, and continued to support them both wholeheartedly. Honestly, I was increasingly frustrated with my daughter's husband, who showed no intention of meeting my husband's expectations. But I held my tongue, respecting my husband's wishes. Then my husband passed away. Our company was run with my husband as the president and me as the vice president. We both had a complete understanding of each other's job roles, so there were no issues in taking over after his death. A few days after the funeral, I was officially appointed as the president with the board's approval. Given my daughter's husband's persistent poor work attitude and her unilateral declaration of cutting ties, there was no longer any reason to keep employing him. There were already complaints from other employees. I decided to fire him. No, that's a lie. My daughter screamed in disbelief. He always said everything was going great at work, that he had the support of his superiors and subordinates, and that he might even get a fast promotion. I was counting on him. Although I knew it, this confirmed that my daughter's husband was just that sort of man. My daughter was completely deceived by him, and I was astounded by her naivety. She continued, confessing that she thought her husband was competent and could survive in the company without my help, that he would earn a high salary, so even if she cut ties with me, he could still stay at the company. That's why she declared her disownment. I listened in silence, dumbfounded by her audacity. Having lived with her for years, I felt foolish for not seeing through her, but she clearly didn't understand the kind of person I was. She really underestimated me. I was not just my husband's wife, I was a co-owner and executive of that company. Did she not even consider that? After venting her anger, My daughter's expression changed to one of pleading. Hey, let's forget about the disownment. You don't want to lose your dear daughter, right? So, can you reconsider firing my husband? I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh at her sudden change of heart. My dear daughter, weren't you the one who accused me of being a terrible parent in front of everyone just a few days ago? I reiterated that I couldn't reverse the decision to fire her husband. His position had already been filled by someone else, as my son, who was about to graduate from a top university, had insisted on joining our company even after turning down offers from major corporations. Mom, I want to support you. I'll work hard, please let me join, he had said. So I decided to fill the vacant position with him. At this, my daughter accused me again, claiming I favored my real child over her and that I didn't love her. I calmly replied, this isn't about favoritism, it's about business. Between someone who showed enthusiasm to work here despite other offers, and someone who never utilized the chances given, the choice is clear for a business owner. Just then my son walked in, yawning, having heard the commotion. Hey, you're on my side, right? Help me convince Mom to take back the decision about my husband's job. My daughter desperately pleaded with her brother, but his reaction was not what she expected. Who are you? You're no longer a child of this family, right? A stranger like you should leave. This is trespassing. Upon recognizing my daughter, my son's expression changed instantly. The sleepiness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold stare directed at her. What, after all, I played with you when we were kids, didn't I? She said. That's all in the past, isn't it? What are you doing now? He retorted. My daughter seemed stunned for a moment, perhaps expecting her brother to take her side. However, as we remained silent, she eventually realized this was no longer her place. With a resigned look, she trudged out of the house. Are you okay with this? I asked him. She's disowned me, but she's still your sister. When I asked him that, my son replied clearly, What are you talking about? She's not my sister. I don't want a family who treats you like a convenient tool, he replied firmly. I felt a bit relieved to hear my son speak so clearly. Later he inquired about what happened to my daughter and her husband. He thought I might be worried about her and asked around. According to what he heard, my daughter's husband initially approached her because her parents were company executives. Marrying her meant having a father-in-law as the company president. Even if he was incompetent or had a bad attitude, he believed a certain status and salary would be guaranteed, and he might even become the president himself someday. Such naivety. In a corporate structure, such nepotism doesn't work. But that's what he believed. When he suddenly got fired, it led to a huge fight with my daughter. It's all your fault for disowning your mother that I got fired. What? It's your fault for being brainless. You're just a leech living off your parents. What did you say? They engaged in a nasty blame game. Eventually, my daughter's husband decided she was of no use to him, declaring he never loved her, and left a signed divorce paper before disappearing. My daughter, perhaps still holding on to hope, searched for him extensively, but hasn't found him yet. Whether they could reconcile even if they did meet is doubtful. Apparently, there were sightings of my daughter's husband in a busy area in front of a train station in another state. He was seen trying to pick up a woman carrying a designer bag and failing miserably. He was wearing ragged clothes and didn't look like he was living an easy life. The commotion at the wedding, whether true or not, seemed to be enough to alienate her friends, leaving her with no one to rely on after being abandoned by her husband. Now completely alone, she had to continue her daily life. Finding herself at a dead end, she had to take on her very first part-time job. It was the same kind of supermarket job she had once looked down upon as menial. However, having never worked before, she was naive about the ways of the world. She struggled. Bullied by the senior staff for her lack of skills and poor work ethic, her life wasn't easy, and she couldn't even enjoy her beloved fashion anymore. While complaining about everything, she was being toughened up by the harsh realities of society. As I told her at the wedding, I hope she continues to strive, no matter what. She's still young and has the potential to change her life with her own efforts. As for me, after my husband's passing, I reorganized some parts of our business and started a new venture. something my husband had always wanted to do. I hope to eventually pass this business on to my son, who's still a new employee. I'm not showing him any favoritism, and he is working as hard as any other staff member. I am committed to growing the company that my husband and I started. As a way of making up for not being able to build a good relationship with my daughter, I sold the house for $400,000. So I'm gonna take my mistress and go on a trip. I was taken aback by Michael's inappropriately cheerful voice and blurted out, "What?" He's calling from the hospital, saying he sold the house for $400,000. What the heck is that about? That's the dear house I inherited from my dad. And to boldly announce he has a mistress, that's sheer madness. What do you mean you sold the house? What's gonna happen to Sarah? When I mentioned my daughter's name, Michael just scoffed and said, "I don't care. She's been getting on my nerves, acting all high and mighty. Of course I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his daughter. I was so angry and shocked at the news of him selling the house and running off with his mistress that I thought I might lose my mind. I've got to somehow stop Michael. He can't just sell the house and hand it over that fast. I've got to do something. My name is Emily Johnson. I am a 39-year-old homemaker. I wish I could say that I live a contented life with my husband Michael, who is a year older than me, and our 9-year-old daughter Sarah. But the truth is, things with Michael are far from harmonious. Since we got married, Michael's personality has gradually changed, and I have suspected for about a year now that he might be cheating. I don't have any proof, so I haven't been able to do anything, but Michael doesn't seem to try very hard to hide his infidelity. Working in a factory for a parts manufacturer, Michael often goes out drinking somewhere 4 or 5 times a week after work. It is conceivable that he is out with work buddies, but he didn't go out nearly as often until a year ago. Moreover, he comes home with a unique perfume scent or prepares expensive bags and shoes I have never seen before as gifts. Of course, he never gave them to me, but there were numerous times he took the gifts, left. I'm too scared to confront him with, "You're having an affair, aren't you?" So, being the coward that I am, I still haven't been able to take any action until I can get solid proof of the cheating. The Michael I met back then seems like a completely different person. I met Michael 10 years ago, dated for a year, and then we got married. I was drawn to his kindness and sincerity, and before I knew it, I was the one in love. He proposed on our 1-year anniversary, we got married, and soon after Sarah was born. To an outsider, it must have looked like a very happy marriage. And yet I can't help but wonder how things ended up like this. It all started around the time Sarah turned 1. When Sarah became more active, rummaging through the house, parenting became even more challenging. As a full-time homemaker, I took care of Sarah all day, but sometimes I couldn't manage alone, and started asking Michael to help with baths and meals after he finished work. At first, Michael, perhaps because he was conscious of his role as a father, cooperated with the childcare as I asked. But as it became a daily routine, he gradually seemed to resent it and stopped trying to be involved in parenting. I've been thinking, this is your job, right? You're a stay-at-home mom, so you should be able to handle the parenting on your own. Why does a tired man like me have to help out after work? Michael exploded with complaints, threw those harsh words at me, and left me and Sarah in the living room as he went straight to the bedroom alone. While I was dealing with Sarah's tantrums during her terrible twos period, struggling just to get her into pajamas without a meltdown, Michael's earlier words were still painfully lodged in my chest. After that, Michael completely withdrew from any interaction with Sarah. Even when she would ask him to play with her on his days off, saying, "Dad, let's play," he would respond without looking up from his horse racing magazine, "Playing is your mom's job. I'm busy." He never took Sarah's feelings into account. Whenever Sarah would cry out, Michael would harshly scold, "Hey, don't cry over something like this. What kind of parenting is Emily doing? To think a stay-at-home mom can't handle childcare? That's just incompetent," glaring at both Sarah and me in turn. I didn't want Sarah to hear Michael's verbal abuse, so we would retreat to our room and end up playing just the two of us. There were moments when I longed to indulge in my hobbies like reading or watching movies, but when you're living with Sarah around the clock, there's hardly any time for yourself. And yet, Michael gets to enjoy his horse racing hobby. I'm the one who bears the brunt of his verbal abuse. It's so unfair, but I couldn't complain because our household depended on Michael's income. Without him, I wouldn't be able to support myself and Sarah. I wouldn't be able to feed Sarah on my own. I was also angry at myself for being so helpless. That's how it was with Michael, disinterested in parenting and living as he pleased. 8 years have passed since then, and Sarah is now 9. Michael's abusive language has never stopped, and the kind Michael I knew before our marriage is nowhere to be found. I lived with Michael, trying not to provoke him, simply to provide for Sarah. "Mom, you're so good at drawing. You should do it as a job," Sarah suddenly suggested one day while we were drawing together. "A job in drawing?" I asked. "Yeah, because I think your drawings are really kind and wonderful," she replied, laughing cheerfully as she looked at the animal illustrations I had drawn. I've always loved drawing, and at one point I even aspired to be a cartoonist. But I realized halfway that it wasn't going to work out, and gave up. However, I still draw illustrations as a hobby. I always show your drawings to my friends, Hannah and Natalie, and they're amazed. They always say how lucky they are to have a mom who can draw such wonderful pictures, Sarah said, complimenting my drawings. Despite her father Michael's cantankerous nature, Sarah has grown up to be honest and straightforward. Her sunny disposition is the complete opposite of my more introverted personality. It seems like she has a lot of friends at school and is even a favorite of her teacher. When Sarah complimented my drawings, it filled me with such pride. Knowing that Sarah has been paying attention to me also gave me a boost of confidence. "Thank you. That makes me happy," I said, and Sarah smiled like a blooming flower. As long as Sarah can smile, I feel like I can keep going with this life. That's what I quietly thought to myself. That night, as usual, Michael came home drunk, stumbling into the living room and collapsing as soon as he arrived. He was completely drunk. Michael's drinking has been getting out of hand lately, and it's becoming quite worrying. Sighing, I peeled the jacket off his slumped body and checked his pockets. "Oh, what's this?" I said as a piece of paper fell out from a pocket that usually only held keys. I scrutinized it closely and realized it was a receipt from a motel. This was definitely incriminating. I had only been suspecting infidelity in a vague sense until now, but here was the physical evidence. While trying to calm the commotion in my heart, I quietly tucked the receipt away on a shelf and began to ponder how to confront Michael. The next morning, still not fully sober, Michael left the house. After Sarah had gone to school, I busied myself with the usual household chores, but I couldn't get the receipt from yesterday out of my mind. I had had my suspicions about Michael's infidelity, and it was my choice not to confront him without evidence. But with concrete evidence now in hand, I knew I had to confront him. Now, in hand, it's hard to just look the other way and keep up the facade of a masked couple. I wanted to get him to admit to his affair and apologize within a week, or even a few days. How? As I was lost in thought, my smartphone started to vibrate. Who could it be at this hour? It was unusual to get a call during the daytime. Looking at the phone, it was an unfamiliar number. For some reason, a feeling of apprehension washed over me as I answered the phone. "Hello, is this Mrs. Johnson, Michael's wife?" "Yes, I am. Who's calling, please?" "This is from General Hospital." Actually, it's about Michael. The call was from the largest hospital in the area. The hospital informed me that Michael had been rushed there by ambulance. He was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease, they explained. Furthermore, they informed me that his kidneys were likely to fail and that he would need a transplant. Overwhelmed by the sudden news, I was asked by the doctor, "Are you all right?" "Yes, but is a kidney transplant possible?" "Yes, if we find a compatible donor quickly, we can perform the transplant." Oh, being told suddenly that Michael needed a kidney transplant due to illness left my mind in a tangle. But the doctor continued to explain the details of the transplant surgery. "Anyway, we will start by checking the compatibility of the candidates, so please cooperate with us." I only half understood what was being said, but it was clear that Michael was seriously ill. As much as he had mocked me or been unfaithful, I didn't wish for him to lose his life. If possible, I wanted him to be saved. That night, I spent the whole time thinking about Michael's transplant surgery. Weeks passed, and we found out the results of the potential kidney transplant candidates within the family. Astonishingly, I turned out to be the best match. Michael's parents were alive, but in poor health and thus not suitable for the surgery. Since Michael was an only child, and I was the healthiest and had the same blood type, it turned out that I was the most suitable donor. If asked whether I had any hesitations, it would be a lie to say I didn't. However, nothing could replace the value of Michael's life. With that in mind, I decided to go through with being the donor for Michael's kidney transplant. When I explained Michael's medical condition and our upcoming transplant surgery to Sarah, she said, "Got it. Do your best," and sent me off with her blessing. While I was hospitalized, Sarah stayed with my in-laws. Despite their poor health, they were well enough to stay at home without much trouble. Sarah was happy to go to her grandparents' house because she got along well with them. This should be fine for a while, I thought to myself, relieved that Sarah was such a good and understanding child. With that reassurance, I faced the transplant surgery. A week later, after signing the consent forms and undergoing the necessary health checks, I donated a kidney to Michael. The surgery was over more quickly than I had expected, and I was hospitalized for about a week, while Michael stayed for 10 days. Thankfully, there were no complications, and the recovery went smoothly. Then, the day before I was due to be discharged, I received another call on my phone. When I answered the phone, wondering who it could be this time, a familiar voice said, "It's me," and I felt a shiver run down my spine. The caller was none other than Michael. Thinking he might thank me for becoming a donor, I asked, "How are you feeling after the surgery?" "It's been a while." I fully expected him to say something like, "I'm feeling better thanks to you, Emily." "Thank you." However, the words that came from the other end of the phone were completely unexpected. "It's about our house," Michael said, pausing for a breath. I was taken aback by the sudden shift to talking about the house. "I sold the house for $400,000, so I'm gonna take my mistress and go on a trip." I was shocked by Michael's inappropriately cheerful voice and blurted out, "What? He's calling from the hospital saying he sold the house for $400,000? What does he mean? That house is the precious one I inherited from my father. And to brazenly declare he has a mistress, that's just insane." "What do you mean you sold the house? What's gonna happen to Sarah?" When I mentioned my daughter's name, Michael just scoffed and said, "I don't care. She's been getting on my nerves, acting all high and mighty. Of course I'm leaving her behind." I was so angry and shocked at the news of him selling the house and running off with his mistress that I thought I might lose my mind. I've got to somehow stop Michael. He can't just sell the house and hand it over that fast. I've got to do something. Michael said I sold the house. I'm going on an overseas trip with my mistress, and then the call ended abruptly. With my mind in turmoil, I tried to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't believe that Michael had suddenly sold the house, especially while he was in the hospital. The shock worsened my condition, and my hospital stay was extended by a few days. In my distress, I felt helpless and lay on the bed, brooding over what to do next. I decided to call Sarah first. Without the house, Sarah and I would have nowhere to go. I was angry that Michael had so boldly declared he had a mistress, but what worried me most was Sarah. I called my in-laws home, and my mother-in-law answered. My mother-in-law quickly handed the phone over to Sarah. "Hello, Sarah? I'm sorry, it looks like my hospital stay is going to be a bit longer. Are you okay? Aren't you feeling lonely? I heard Dad sold our house, so we don't have a place to go back to." Anxious about Sarah, I peppered her with questions in quick succession. Then Sarah responded with a bright voice, "Mom, it's okay. I've taken care of it." Confused by Sarah's words about having taken care of it, I was left puzzled, tilting my head. See, Dad told me he asked his mistress to sell our house, but actually it was Grandma and Grandpa. Sarah meticulously explained to me what had happened during my hospitalization. Listening to Sarah's story, I was very surprised. It was because an unexpected turn of events had unfolded without my knowledge. "So don't worry, Mom. I'm fine." "Thank you," I said, encouraged by Sarah's maturity, finally feeling a bit of peace settling in. Yet, if what Sarah was saying was true, I wondered what was happening with Michael and his mistress at this moment. I was curious, but I told myself that rest was more important now and allowed myself to fall asleep. 3 days later, having recovered, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. "Mom, welcome back?" Sarah came running over with a happy look on her face. Behind her, my mother-in-law was smiling gently, saying, "That's wonderful. Now, Michael, that man has really done something unbelievable." "Emily, I'm sorry," my father-in-law said, looking grim as he apologized to me. I wondered how Michael could turn out so twisted when he had such wonderful parents. "No, it's my fault for not speaking up sooner. Well, Emily, there's something we need to tell you." "Yes, what is it?" I sat down in front of my in-laws with Sarah beside me, ready to listen to their story. I was surprised again by their tale, but my mother-in-law reassured me with firm encouragement we won't let Michael have his way. After the conversation, Sarah and I attempted to head home, but on the way I saw a familiar man and an unknown woman arguing with a realtor in front of his office. There was no mistaking it, it was Michael. And the woman next to him was undoubtedly his mistress. Michael was in sweatpants, his hair a mess. The mistress was wearing a short skirt with only one high heel, and her face was bare. "Come on, do something about this. How can the house not be sold?" "Yeah, what about my $400,000? As I've said, the buyer canceled the purchase last night, so there is no contract anymore." "Why would they cancel? Damn it." Michael was stomping his feet in anger, with his mistress screeching beside him, drawing shocked looks from people passing by. Sarah and I were also surprised, but realizing this was about us, we approached them. "What are you doing here?" I asked Michael unexpectedly, making him and his mistress gasp in surprise when they saw me. "Oh, you? Oh, I get it. You're the one who did it, right? You must have talked the buyer out of it." "What? That's ridiculous. What are you even talking about?" I was astonished by their baseless accusations, and instinctively shielded Sarah behind me. Seeing the realtor's confusion, I stepped forward and said, "I'm his wife." The realtor replied with a dazed, "Oh, are you kidding me with this cancellation?" Because of this, we had to turn back right before boarding the plane, and now we can't buy a new house. And I still have debts from the money I spent on her. Michael was pointing at his mistress as he said this. I see. Finally, I understood what Michael was up to. Michael was trying to sell the house to pay off the debts from money he spent on his mistress, and to buy a new place for the two of them to live. He knew very well it was the precious house I had inherited from my late father. How incredibly selfish. To think he would ignore Sarah and me and even attempt to take away my most important asset is unbelievable. I was shaking with anger. "Excuse me, but isn't it you who is being disrespectful? What are you doing showing up out of nowhere? You're talking back to me? You wouldn't even be able to eat if it weren't for me." Despite the critical situation, he was still spewing insults. Disgusted with Michael, I continued speaking. "Do you really think you can sell my precious house without even discussing it with me? I'm the owner of that house. Did you forge the documents or something? And you've been bad-mouthing the buyer of the house. But do you realize that the people who were trying to buy it were your parents?" "Huh? What do you mean?" "Yes. What I had heard from Sarah over the phone while I was in the hospital was that my in-laws had pretended to buy my house as a strategy to discipline Michael. My in-laws had heard about all of Michael's misdeeds from Sarah and were furious, saying it was unbelievable that he would do such things to Emily and his good granddaughter. My in-laws believed Sarah over their son because of her inherent brightness and honest nature. I'll explain. Grandma and Grandpa knew about Dad and that woman, and they were really angry. I knew Dad was trying to sell the house, so I talked to them about it. That house is important because it's the one Mom's dad left to her, and they said it shouldn't be sold easily. That's why they pretended to buy it before anyone else could." Sarah stepped forward and spoke confidently about the situation. "What are you doing to me? Damn old man and woman. And you sticking your noses in shows what poor parenting you've had." Michael, desperate and defeated, let out a vulgar laugh. Sarah remained unfazed by Michael's attack. However, I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it under Michael's nose. "I want a divorce. Seeing the divorce papers, Michael snorted and scoffed once again. Divorce? You said it. Are you okay with divorcing? Do you think you can live without me? He seemed to think that as a homemaker, I would be lost without him. Perhaps that would have been true in the past. But now I had a plan. Determined to shatter Michael's foolish assumptions, I opened my mouth to speak. You needn't worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents. What? A lifetime gift? What's that? Michael and his mistress looked bewildered. In fact, this morning, my in-laws said they had something to discuss with me, and it turned out to be about a lifetime gift. My in-laws were in poor health, uncertain when they might collapse. They expressed a wish to give me a part of their assets before it was too late. Naturally, I initially refused. I suggested that such a gift should go to Michael instead. However, my in-laws said Emily, who has given us a lovely granddaughter, is more important to us than a son who can't even say thank you for an organ donation. With deep gratitude, I bowed my head and accepted the lifetime gift from my in-laws. It's your father and mother's decision. They said they wanted to give it to me, not you. Michael's face turned pale, and no wonder. The assets that should have been his were now going to his wife, from whom he was getting divorced. That's dirty. That's not right. It's normal for a child to inherit their parents' assets. I'll talk to them now. If they won't listen, I'll take it to court. Michael glared at me with furious eyes, shouting. I sighed at Michael's shallow thinking. It's about time, isn't it? Perhaps it's time to deliver the final blow. Stepping forward and closing the distance to Michael, I locked eyes with him and unleashed my words. You're talking nonsense. This whole mess started because you belittled me and even took a mistress. It's your fault for spending all that money, right? Your parents made a completely justified decision. And do you even have the money to go to court? Even if you did, how do you think your past betrayals will look? Michael squeaked out as if he was squeezing out a scream. Seeing me looking furious up close, I could tell he was shaking. I'm sorry. I won't take it to court. Just forgive me. He was desperately apologizing, but it was too late. I glared at Michael again and delivered the final blow. For insulting Sarah and me, I'll be taking every penny of the compensation for emotional distress and child support. If you can't pay, I'll chase you to the ends of the earth to collect. Be ready for it. Michael and his mistress screamed and ran away. The realtor, who had seen everything, said to me with a posture as if his back gave out, "Thank you so much. No, I'm the one who should apologize for the trouble I've caused." Feeling uncomfortable staying there any longer, I took Sarah's hand and we headed home. Mom, that was so cool. Thank you for standing up for me, Sarah. Even in such a situation, a smile was on Sarah's face. I vowed to myself to protect her for the rest of my life. Later on, I was able to divorce Michael without any issues. The long-suffering marriage ended so easily. It was anticlimactic. I even wondered why I had put up with everything until now. It seemed Michael really did pour money into his affair, and he had to borrow money from somewhere. His mistress left him, saying she couldn't be with such a poor man anymore. Misfortunes often come together, and Michael's company had to cut back on staff due to a decrease in sales from a shortage of materials. Michael, who worked in the factory, was one of the first to be laid off. It's an inconvenience, for sure, but it's hard to believe he was laid off for no reason at all. Probably the company let go of those who were underperforming or had poor conduct first. Given how Michael used to strut around at home, it's likely he had the same attitude at work towards his subordinates. Now, having lost his job, his lover, and his wife, Michael is scraping by with part-time jobs. Lacking the energy to look for a new full-time job, he's settling into the routine of working and resting whenever he likes, which must surely feel bleak. But there's no room for sympathy. I did what I could for Michael, even donating a part of my kidney to him. Despite that, he made a mockery of me, so it seems like karma has caught up with him. He should just focus on working hard to pay off his debts. As for me, I started doing illustration work, living off the assets I inherited from my in-laws for a while. It was Sarah's compliment about my drawing skills that started it all. Orders are still few, but my clients say my work is meticulous and skillful. I plan to increase my clientele and work hard to raise Sarah properly.